It is lovely to be here, and I recognise that I'm amongst early years educators, primary educators and secondary educators, and I'm going to try and find a link between our work as best I can. But if it's okay, I'm going to start with what I think you're very familiar with, and that is your split screen task design. I was really taken by this because it reflects a lot of the work that we're doing in the SACE. And essentially, as I understood this, it was rather than either or, it was both and. These things were equally important, and you could develop dispositions and capabilities by looking at content, and through content you could also develop students' capabilities. Because if you didn't focus on the dispositions or the capabilities, and you solely focused on the knowledge, as important as that is, the claim of actually spending the time through the subjects developing the core and the capabilities would never be achieved. But it's fair to say there's a bit of work to do. If I'm a curriculum designer, then how on earth are we going to help people to do that? And the answer is, well, we're going to have to develop curriculum that allows teachers to develop the capabilities and the attributes within young people in order to achieve the vision. Well, if I'm a teacher, how am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to have my split-screen pedagogical design, otherwise I'm not going to achieve the capabilities and I'm not going to achieve the vision. Sure, they have to know something. Goes without saying. You'd expect after 13 years at schooling you do know something. But I'm going to have to know what to do with that, and I'm going to have to know how to do that myself. And I'm going to have a sense of who I am as a person and a learner and a citizen if I'm going to contribute. How well are we able to evidence the capabilities in curriculum and in students' learning, young people's learning, all the way from early years through to year 12? Could we do it better? Well, especially if our vision was asking us to do that. And well, how might we do that? Something that might inspire us is this picture of curriculum or in the future, or of learners, of young people, which you'd be very familiar with. But it seems to suggest that young people need knowledge, skills, attitudes and values, and they're intertwined in this case as competencies. We might argue they're capabilities, but it's not in any way saying you don't need to know something. It's not in any way saying you don't need skills, but it's saying you need all of these things. And so if we were designing curriculum for this kind of learner, we would have to design curriculum that enabled those things to be developed and assessed. As senior secondary, we'd have to do that. And if we were teaching that curriculum, we would have to do the split screen. People look to senior secondary curriculum and they look to what happens there as a guide to what is being valued. And some people say, well, whilst this ATAR continues and the whole thing is just brought down into a rank, well, we're going to have to play along that way. Now, we don't own the ATAR. The ATAR is owned by the universities, but we do own subjects and we do own curriculum. So we could be doing something, and we are trying to do something, about opening up this whole concept of the both and. And how we're trying to do that, first of all, is through our subject renewal. So we're renewing all of the subjects in the SACE. And it's great. And our board has said to us quite strongly, well, if we're doing that, what's driving that renewal? It can't simply be integrating the Australian curriculum in, as important as that might be in 16 subjects or 15. It has to be driven by something else. And so what it is driven by is what the board expects to see when it's accrediting subjects. Where is the growth in the capabilities in these subjects? Where is this relationship between large concepts and the contexts? Where's the quality assessment that values things like collaboration? Where is it? Because if it's not in the subjects, then we're not doing our bit to make sure that we're helping to prepare young people for that world that they're in now, which is demanding that of them. The students have to have a significant part of ownership of that subject. What am I doing? Why am I doing that? And the teacher has to be able to support the young person to be able to make that subject work for him or her. It's just really interesting to see that relationship between the teacher and the student in that and other subjects. So here's what we might consider doing. I want you to imagine the student going through life in the partnership with you. And I've tried to show that as they're growing. But you see that belonging becoming, I think I'm still doing that. So I'm not sure that that finishes in the early years framework. Maybe it's a way of conceptualising what is common amongst the partnership, and what is common as a lifelong learner is continually seeking to be like that. And then in the early years framework, we describe those capabilities in a particular way. But it's powerful, of becoming this sense of your identity, of who you are, and starting to think of yourself as a learner. And then it evolves into the 7 capabilities of the Australian curriculum, which are also in our subjects. And there must be a connection between those. And then in the early years framework, which we want to do more of, there's this suggestion to teachers. Here's how you can promote these things. Maybe we should be doing that from early years to year 12. Here's how you can do it in your subjects. Here's how you can do it in the learning experiences. And then importantly, how on earth would I know it when I saw it? Well, here's some evidence of what that looks like. Now, for us in our subject renewal, we're putting that evidence into the performance standards, so you have to do it, and you have to assess it, and it's valued. But from the early years through to year 12, it might be a way of supporting us to have a common language and understanding. And lastly, and most powerfully, what we've identified is that young people who can think about themselves as learners and describe themselves as learners, their strengths and their weaknesses, and what they might do next, seem to be the students that are most powerfully set up to be that kind of learner and that kind of citizen. So you would call that, I suppose, metacognition, thinking about your thinking. It is meant to be what underpins the personal learning plan. And it is meant to be what underpins the research project evaluation and folio, where you're thinking about how it's going. But perhaps it's something that's going to underpin all of our educational experience, and maybe it's partly what the personal and social capability means.